It's amazing to me that even with this information, so many estates will just go into litigation. Everybody's heard about some estate somewhere that's still tied up in the courts 15 years later, right?
Yeah.
It's amazing to me, knowing this information, that can happen.
Welcome back to Money Talks Life Listens, and we are picking things back up with Bruce Soloway of Blanco Law.
Okay, so in keeping with sort of the thought of family dynamics, how often do the family dynamics complicate, the estate planning, and what are some common scenarios that you have encountered? Or like I would expect, blended families or unequal inheritances, estranged family members, et cetera, would sort of complicate it, but what does it look like for you?
I usually try to approach family dynamics by having an understanding of what's going on behind the scenes, including the blended family, of course, is obvious, but when I'm talking to somebody that wants a will and they've got 3 kids, it's like, okay, how much do we trust them? And no, don't tell me that I trust all my kids. Anybody have a drug problem? Anybody have gambling problem? Anybody have financial problems? Do you want to put somebody in charge? How do they get along with each other? So the family dynamics, understanding it, before we start talking about specific documents and things like that, are really important. In everything that we've talked about, who can you appoint as a representative? Who's going to end your life, right? That's the extreme example, but are they up for it? So having an understanding of that, just because you're married and have kids, there's follow-up questions. Kids with your current spouse, or is this the second spouse, or what's the relationship like with the previous one, the previous spouse? Talking about assets and family dynamics, it's like, okay, well, if you're doing your new will because you've separated, has the spouse that you separated from, have they got their share of the assets, or right? All sorts of dynamics, and the more understanding of the family dynamics, how the kids get along if they're your beneficiaries, the easier it is to come up with a coherent estate plan that has a high chance of high probability of success, and without that background. So it's really essential to have an understanding and an honest assessment from oftentimes from a parent about the relationship with the children and the relationship among the children, because I always ask them to think about, this is what they're going to see when you're dead.
Yes.
Now, is your legacy one of hatred and anger? Is that what you want to do? Are you okay with it? And just turn your mind to it. And it's like, sometimes there's no other, I'm cutting so-and-so out, or I'm not appointing the oldest, the one that has been the controlling one and looked after my financial affairs, because, I don't trust them as much as the other one. And it's like, all right, it's fine as long as you've turned your mind to it, then, yeah, but oftentimes people come in with the idea, this is what I should do, and it's like, a little bit of the legal advice is, why are you doing it? What's the dynamics like? And what does it look like to, it's something simple like, should I give my will to my kids?
Exactly.
No. No, and no. And most of the things that can happen by sharing the contents of your will with children, when you have multiple children, almost all of them are bad, and it's not much good, right?
How often do you find that you reference like trusting the kids, or the older one who's control of the financial situation right now, but you don't quite trust them to manage the rest of it? How often do you get people that come in and say, well, I've got that situation going on, so I'd like it for these two to act together, just so that I know, if you think about controlling from the grave, that I don't quite trust this one, but I'd like to bring this other one who's contrary to this first one and do it. They must do it together so that I know it gets done right.
There's a lot of that. There's a lot of preconceived notions that, and I try to explain to people that you may have problems, in choosing an executor because of those considerations. You can put a joint executor in, but if the family dynamics are that you're the older sibling, sis, and you're the power broker in the family, and Mom appointed us to act jointly, well, you're just going to push me around in death, and I'm going to renounce.
Yeah.
Right.
And it's like, it's possible. So the dynamics of not only Mom's relationship with you or me, but our relationship is, matters as well.
Yeah.
And so you need to get a feel for that. I'm not a big believer in joint executors, simply because it just takes more legal time and your bill's going to be a little bit bigger.
Right.
Or a lot bigger, depending on. But in some cases, it's the best case scenario. When you have two kids and they don't get along and see eye to eye in your lifetime, appoint them jointly. Let them figure it out. They're spending their money at this point. I mean, it gets complicated if you have 5 kids and then you put 2 in there and they'll be fighting and they're spending all 5 of the kids' monies. But if there's only 2 of them, appoint them jointly. And let them figure it out when you're gone. It's the best you can do. It's up for the client to hear all of this and then come up with a plan that they think
Right.
will work.
Right.
Yeah.
But,
So you mentioned a little bit about not sharing the will with the kids a few seconds ago here. And so I wanted to kind of talk a little bit about unequal inheritances, because we hear this coming up in conversation a lot more now. And we're talking a lot about family dynamics. So have mom and dad or somebody naming, their children unequally in the will, not sharing the will, and then it's time for everyone to read the will because mom and dad have passed on. I see a lot of potential issues there in terms of like the breakage of the family if this hasn't really been communicated with the kids prior. I know we've had clients in the past who they maybe had an extra lump sum in the will for a certain individual because they actually took care of them at end of life, but that was communicated with the rest of the families. And even with it being communicated ahead of time, there was still a little bit of resentment at the time when the initial check was cut, when the eventual check was cut. So I'm just curious to get your perspective on the unequal inheritances part of things and like maybe where you've seen it go well and where things have gone wrong.
the unequal inheritance, can be addressed in estate assets or outside. Certainly, if anything in the estate, and we're dealing with spouse and children only, have entitlement to challenge. So if you cut me out of the will, and there's 3 kids, I can challenge it. I'm going to succeed because I'm going to take money out of the estate to pay for the legal costs. So your executor is going to figure that out, and they're going to give me something, right? For sure. And I give this advice to the clients all the time, because your executor, even if they're emotional about it, even if they don't want, well, mom said, you get nothing. You can't do it. You have to act in the best interest of the estate, and if I can pay you off $50,000 from the estate instead of paying $100,000 to a lawyer to figure out that I'm right, I have to.
And can you elaborate on that a little bit more for me? Why do you have to?
The way I always ask people to consider it when I'm explaining it to them is that I'm your executor. I have no interest in the estate. I'm being paid a wage as the executor because that's the responsibility. My obligations are really simple. Gather the estate and distribute. And I have to do it in the most economically viable way. And if I have to pay $100,000 to a lawyer to defend the claim, or I can give you $50,000 to make the claim go away, the choice is I have to. I have a legal obligation to do that. Now, people always don't do it. And they might get away with it, but only if they go to trial and they win, right? So you're going to spend $100,000. And so if your executor is doing their job properly, without emotion, this is an easy decision, right? I have to, because it's best for the estate, we're going to now be distributing $1 million instead of $900,000 to the beneficiaries.
So let's just say that the executor was green because they didn't hire a lawyer to do it, and it was a family member.
Okay.
And they decided, hey, we're going to pay the legal fees, let it get contested, do all the things. Now, could the beneficiaries come and go after the executor and say, hey, you made a poor choice here by not paying out the $50,000?
Yes.
And they could be on the hook for it, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yes. And so your classic example is, as an executor, sitting on real estate, right? Just sitting on it because I don't want to sell it, or, maybe as the executor I have I'm staying there or something like that. It's convenient for me. And then we have somebody drives a plane into a building in New York again, and our market crashes. And we've cost the estate $200,000, right? It doesn't matter that I'm not a beneficiary. I'm your executor.
And you've dropped the ball.
I dropped the ball. What possible, and there are always exceptions to the rule of not selling right away. But if you're getting my legal advice as an executor, you sell it as is and you sell it now. Right? You've got your grant of probate, transfer the thing into your name, get it on the market and get it sold. When you wait, you may be called to account for why you waited. Apart from the beneficiary saying, I want money and I want it now, what is the value in waiting? And what's your authority for doing that? And when you cost the estate hundreds of thousands of dollars, yes, you leave yourself open for damages being awarded against you.
And I think a lot of people who appoint executors, they don't realize what you just said there, that you're actually putting yourself, opening yourself up to risk if you're not knowledgeable in this area and you don't consult with a professional lawyer or service, and you don't do things properly. And I'm pretty sure that the CRA or the government, they're going to come and they're used to claiming, well, I just didn't know what I didn't know. That's probably not going to be a good enough answer for them or the beneficiaries.
Right.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. And, it gets deflected if you make a mistake and you're a beneficiary and the executor. Right? We just adjust your share a little bit, perhaps. That's the worst that happens. But the advice to the executor is always the same from the lawyer, right? Imagine you're not getting anything out of this. You're getting $5,000 to be the executor or whatever you're getting. You have to make these decisions this way. You have to maximize the return, not to upset your brother who you're mad at, but it has to be non-emotional, and it has to be in the best interest of the beneficiaries collectively, whether you're one or not. And so it's there are exceptions, but by and large, it's, when we're dealing with a residential unit that has, 70 to 80% of the value of the estate tied up in it, you get permission from the courts in terms of your grant of probate, transfer the property into your name as the executor, get it cleaned up, and get it sold, right?
It's amazing to me hearing this, how many, it's amazing to me that even with this information, so many estates will just go into litigation and just sort of whittle through the assets as they're going through the litigation. And I guess you said it earlier that, you don't always, people get emotional, don't always act in the best interest of the estate. But still, knowing the responsibility that could come back to the executor and stuff if they're not acting in the best responsibility of the estate, that they still can be in litigation for so long. Everybody's heard about some estate somewhere that's still tied up in the courts 15 years later, right?
Yeah.
It's amazing to me, knowing this information, that could happen.
It can. I mean, towards the end of my working for myself, we were getting probate through and distributed usually within a year. But I also had estates that, been going on for 5 years. Usually it's litigation, and litigation is by its nature really slow and plodding. The other side's, for whatever reason, not moving things forward, not accepting proposals, procedural proposals or whatever. And it can just go on for years and years and years with nobody getting any money at all except the lawyers being paid.
Right.
And it's not good. And usually when it's families, it's, the results are well known. You're within a range, the results are often well known by experienced lawyers. They can look at it. And, I had one as I ended my litigation career where the deceased had 3 children, 3 different mums, and one of the children, by the time he had separated from the mum at the before she was noticeably pregnant, I guess, and the deal was she demanded, you never ever acknowledge me or my child. They lived in the same community for at least 20 years. And I'll never come after you for support. You don't acknowledge that I won't name you as the dad. And he said, fine, went on, had a couple other kids, and never did. But the sister, the executor, knew of this. And so when he died, we sought her out and had to give her notice, of course, because she was a child, and DNA test and everything. And what do you do with a child like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
The child was completely innocent, certainly in need to, a young 20-ish student struggling with student loans and trying to get educated and stuff, and had no contact with dad. And yet the suggestion has always been, well, the 2 kids that had a relationship, 40% each, the other one, 20%. And seems pretty reasonable, certainly within the different lawyers on different sides at different times had come up with exactly the same proposal, yet it's been 3 years in litigation. The estate stalls, right? The estate completely stalled. Everything had been sold, converted into cash. There was a lot of work to do on that particular estate, and it just 3 years in litigation, even though everybody knows what's going to ultimately happen within 18 to 22% for her, and it's never going to go to court because people just don't.
Wow.
So yeah, take forever.
So I guess to close the loop on, family dynamics, and I think this is really good because we're talking about privacy here and, maybe things that have come up from the past. Are there situations that you would see where keeping the will and intentions private create more problems than it actually solves?
It can. It depends on the family. I always tell my clients that there's only 2 people in the world that need to know what's in the will, and I don't care who's beside you when you're doing your will. You as the one signing it, and me as the one drafting it. Everybody else is, you're choosing to share it with them. It's not meant to be seen. It can be changed, so you can give it to anybody you want, but you can change it. So it's not binding on you in any way, shape, or form. It provides them with really no benefit other than knowing that perhaps they convinced you to do something at this moment in time. That's a lot of the reason why I say, it's your property, do whatever you want with it. But it's, I would suggest that you always keep it private. When we do wills, especially for the elderly people that, have families that aren't fighting. This is where the will is. It's fine to tell them. This is where the instructions are that are outside of the will, and this is where my documents are that you need to find when I'm gone. That's okay, but the actual contents of it, it's, yeah. And healthy families, they never come back. They probably do. I think my parents always said, kids get equal shares. And I think that's the norm. I think anything other than that, and you're sharing it, it's
A recipe for disaster.
there's why, right?
So we were talking about the will just now, and how the only people to see the will are the person who drafts it, the person who writes it. Now, then later on, it becomes about the executor, right, working through it. So maybe for our listeners, let's talk a bit about what the role of the executor actually involves, because I know it's so much more than what people think it is. What do people often underestimate about the responsibility of an executor?
The just the hours and the work involved.
Right.
You're dealing with emotional people, and the chances are you're going to be dealing with emotional stuff as well, and it's difficult. You're grieving, and then you're making funeral arrangements.
Right.
You want something that you didn't know you wanted until your parent had died, and now you don't think you can live without it, and that brother in Toronto says that he wants it.
Right, right.
They're real difficult circumstances. Your choice of your executor comes down to a lot of these things. Family dynamics, again, is very important. And the legacy you leave behind if you're going to cut A out, or if they don't get along and stuff like that. People need to consider, do I have a third party as my executor? They have to look into that. They have to at least consider that based on family dynamics and their assets. Do they need, if they have a third party, does it need to be a professional, somebody because they're distant from the emotion and that? They need to look into the costs of hiring a professional person, and then who do you appoint as an executor? If you appoint your lawyer or something like that, then you have the whole age thing. Well, as a lawyer, when you're appointing an individual, but then knowing the individual, you can provide instructions to. Can you appoint a more corporate, where you're appointing a trust company or somebody like that? And it's like, you don't know who you're appointing. You're appointing a trust company. They're going to be there. There's continuity, and the cost and all that. But does that work for you? So there's a lot of considerations that go into that. You certainly want somebody. If the family is fine and we all get along, and we're equal beneficiaries, then I'm pushed pretty hard to find one of the kids to do it. Save your money, because it's your money that your executor will be paid in priority. So you're taking money away from the kids. So
Right.
Contemplate, each of the kids is going to pay $10,000 for an executor. Are they going to be okay with that, or is it necessary? And sometimes it is, and sometimes it makes financial sense. All the kids are in the States, and who am I going to appoint, right? Especially if they have investments. There's real challenges, I understand, with getting investments transferred into the name of an American executor, and it's like, so before you appoint one of your kids from California, and so there's a lot that goes into it, and in family dynamics again, of course, and when you're choosing your executor with families that there's nobody just in Vancouver to come over and take care of things. There's a lot of considerations that go into that, and
Right.
and a lot of cost and stuff like that.
And I might just add on the cross-border side, because I see this a lot, being a cross-border advisor, is that we do see some family members who will appoint an executor that lives in the States, but then that's where the IRS gets into comes into the picture even more, because a lot of the times, depending on where the executor comes from, they might deem that that estate is now in whatever state that an executor lives in, right? So, I mean, there's a lot more to it on that side of things. I wanted to ask you, Bruce, about the actual time it takes to be an executor, right? Because I think we've talked about this in other podcasts about how people think it's actually an honor to name their children as an executor, and it's like this great gift, and we see it as like, oh,
Totally not that.
Matt, it's not an honor. It's that's almost something you want to do as a punishment. And if once you actually open up the hood and look underneath of it, it's a lot of work. It could be a part-time to full-time job depending on the complexity. So what are some of the things that people as an executor would actually have to do?
Well, it depends on the estate. I'll give you a couple of examples. The first time I was appointed as an executor, I had a woman come into the office on her way to the hospital. She was terminal, and she thought, and we had to rebook the appointment to deal with her this week because she was going to the hospital. And she came in, and without any advance notice, I've got 2 days to prepare the will. I'm meeting her the first time, and she says, I want you to be the executor. And I said, I don't think I have the time for it, and isn't there anybody else? And she said, there's nobody else, no children, no spouse. I'm an only child, my parents are dead. And I've been out here on my own. I said, okay, and we figured out that I said I can do it, but I'll do it jointly with somebody else in the office, because I knew, without firsthand experience as an executor, excuse me, I knew that there was a lot to do, and that I just didn't have time Monday, Friday, 9 to 5 to get it all done. So we appointed. In that particular case, she died within 6 weeks of appointing us as her executor. She had misled us.
Wow.
She had 3 children. She had actually 4. One had been adopted young, all in Ontario. And when we go to, we got notification of death. We knew that the neighbor had the key. And we went to the house, and we were searching through documents and talking to the neighbor, who should have been appointed, but wasn't for some reason. And we saw in where the person kept their documents, something that was really old, like a 20-year-old insurance policy from employment back in Ontario or something, and had 2 children's name as beneficiary. So, what started off as something simple, because the executor's job, gather the estate, convert it to cash, pay the bills, and distribute in accordance with the will. It's really 1, 2, 3. And that occasion, everything stopped because we had to figure out who the kids were. So everything from internet sleuthing. Thankfully, the name was, we weren't dealing with John Smith from Ontario. We were dealing with a unique enough name that with a little bit of internet sleuthing, I was able to figure out one of the children's name that was on this report. Like I said, there was a 3rd child with the same last name that I didn't know existed at this point.
Oh my gosh.
Wow.
So you're spending a lot of time doing that. In the meantime, the hours are, you got to cut the grass, right? The city will give you notice if you don't cut the grass. You got to make sure the car's still working. You got to get the insurance done. You have to do. There's a lot to do, and it goes on while we're figuring out who the children are and getting addresses, because that initial call, if you can imagine that, you got to sound like a scammer, right? People are going to hang up on you, so it's really difficult to get somebody's attention. And by the way, there's your mom that told me you didn't exist has passed away, and there's an estate, and by the way, you don't get any of it. But you know, so there was a lot,
Right.
and of course they have the opportunity to challenge the estate. And as the executor, I point this out to them and say, get yourself a lawyer, challenge the estate, and right, see what happens. Right, just protect your jurisdiction to challenge the estate. And so we put in probably on that estate, which was rather simple. There was just a house, a car, and bank accounts. Easily 100 hours. I'm working on one right now that has been over 3 years since he died. He owned multiple pieces of property. And he had been there for 70 years, his whole life on the same property. Took over from his parents, and you know, inventorying the these are farm properties.
Yes.
A massive job, at least 300 hours on that.
Did you have to dig up the yard, look for buried money?
No, we didn't have to do that. But the shed with his farming equipment and tools, or whatever you call these things, looked like a Home Depot that went up 7 layers. You needed a ladder to
Wow.
get up, and it was on the outsides of the building and in the middle.
Holy moly.
And it was massive, and just, you know, stuff there from the, you know, the turn of the century, I'm sure, had never been moved, building equipment and such, and you know, that a massive, massive job, and of course the will was complicated. The properties went to individuals or a charity, and then the money and the stuff would go to 13 different beneficiaries.
Oh, holy moly.
We're easily over 300 to 350 hours on that one. Of course, we haven't been paid a nickel for our professional
Right.
services between then and now. That's just not the way it works. You know, we might wait another year for the government to get back to us.
Holy moly.
Right. So you don't know. Choosing an executor, I mean, nobody, and I say to clients, nobody ever wants to do it twice.
Right.
You know, you've been through it once, and that's a lot of and going back to where we started, that's a big reason why people come in here to see me and say, like, I don't want my kids to have to do what I just did to get rid of
Right.
mom and dad stuff.
Right. What's one piece of advice that you would give to families who know they should address their estate planning, but they continue to delay it?
You know, the chances are that you will leave a mess, and it will cost you way more than it should. It all comes out of your estate. There's no bargains in death. There's no discounts. You'll pay and pay and pay from your estate, keeping it from your kids. Just put things in order. It's you know, and your legacy is important.
Right.
You know, when you're doing estate planning, you don't want to leave a legacy of people not knowing what to do and fighting over money and such things. And yeah, just turn your mind to it and get her done. I know nobody wants to go and visit a lawyer, and the fear of cost and things like that. You know, but it really is necessary. It's you know, it's like getting a physical at the at the dock, right? It's every once in a while, just make sure things are in order. Most times when people come in for a review with me, it's, you know, we're done in an hour, and then maybe there's new documents to draft, but oftentimes there's not. And turn your mind to it, and then there's peace of mind. I don't have to deal with this again, right? And
Right.
Right.
That's the thing, you know, the power of attorney. You know, yeah. Will it be necessary? Yeah, maybe not. And certainly when it's you and a spouse coming in, it's not going to be necessary for one of you. right? For sure. It's very unlikely that it's going to be necessary for both of you. So yeah, you're wasting a little bit of time and money having it done jointly. But, you know, if it bothers you at night at all, get it done. You know, sleep a little bit better at night.
I know that when I had my estate documents all packaged up and redone and whatever, gosh, could I sleep well at night. It made me feel so good to know that I tried really hard, and I hope I've succeeded for now, because obviously we'll have to review it as time goes on, but for now to know that I've done the best I can for,
Right.
you know,
Right.
my family later on.
Yeah. Yeah.
But you've said some really cool things that I think I'm going to never forget. So the one is you pay now or you pay later, right? That is, because it's going to happen. And then the second one is there's no bargains in death. There's no discounts.
God.
Like that's huge.
Well, thank you so much for being with us today. We so appreciate your time. And like Melissa said, just to echo it, we've learned so much today.
So you can find Bruce at Blanco Law in Parksville, BC.
Thanks so much for coming.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Thanks so much for watching and listening to today's episode.
As always, you can check out our website, islewealth.ca, or follow us on Spotify, YouTube, or Instagram.
Thanks so much.
Bye for now.
Corporate disclaimer. This podcast has been prepared by and with expressed opinions of Joanne Cabin and Melissa McGuire, and are not necessarily the opinions of Raymond James Ltd, RJL. Statistics, data, and other information presented are from sources RJL believes to be reliable, but their accuracy cannot be guaranteed. This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be construed as an offer or solicitation for the sale or purchase of securities. Investors considering any investment should consult their investment advisor to ensure that it is suitable for the investor's circumstances and risk tolerance before making an investment decision. Past performance is no guarantee of future results. Information provided in this podcast is general in nature and should not be construed as providing legal, accounting, and/or tax advice. Should viewers have any specific questions and/or issues in these areas, please consult a legal, tax, and/or accounting advisor. RJL is a member of the Canadian Investor Protection Fund. Raymond James USA Ltd. advisors may only conduct business with residents of the states and/or jurisdictions in which they are properly registered. Raymond James USA Limited is a member of FINRA and SIPC. We hope you enjoyed the podcast, and for more information, please visit islewealth.ca.